Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Paul, I'm with the Dicey Review, and tonight we're going to be looking at the 1 to 4 player game Spring Meadow being released by Stronghold Games and Edition Spielwiese. Spring Meadow comes with all of the components that you see here, including a double-sided hiking map, 4 double-sided mountain boards, 5 picnic tiles with hiking pins on the opposite side, 25 marmot tokens, 1 signpost to be assembled before the first game, 1 compass, 72 rock tiles in various sizes. The game also comes with 100 meadow tiles. To begin setup, place the hiking map on the table with the appropriate player count showing. This is the symbol for the 2 and 4 player map. Shuffle all meadow tiles and place 1 randomly in each space of the hiking map. Set aside the remaining meadow tiles as you will need to use them later to refill the board. Place the rock tiles, marmots, picnic and hiking pins, and compass within reach of all players. Place the signpost next to the starting player symbol on the board. Next, give each player a double-sided mountain board randomly. Make sure the arrow on the mountain board is facing up. You may have to orient your tile horizontally if your table space is limited. Just make sure that each player uses the same orientation. The player most recently on a mountain becomes the start player. Alternatively, this can be decided randomly. Then, each player after the start player will take a rock tile. Depending on the player count, the size of the tile will be different. In a 2-player game, the second player takes a 2-space rock tile. These rock tiles must be placed on the player's first turn in addition to their meadow tile. You're now ready to play the game. In Spring Meadow, players are taking turns selecting meadow tiles from the hiking map. They can select tiles based on the position of the signpost marker. The signpost marker will allow a player to take any tile in the column or row next to the signpost marker. So for instance, on their first turn, a player could take any of these tiles. Once they select a meadow tile, they must then place the meadow tile on their mountain board. When players place tiles on their board, they have to pay attention to burrows in the mountain, and players can also place their tiles cleverly to earn rock tile bonuses. Scoring phases will be triggered when there are a certain number of meadow tiles left in active rows, and players will then count all their completed rows starting from the bottom of their board to tally their score. The player with the highest score will earn a hiking pin, and then they'll have to cover all of their burrows, which makes placement more difficult. The first player to earn 2 hiking pins wins the game. Beginning with the start player, each player will take a turn. Turn order will proceed in a clockwise direction. On a player's turn, they have to take 4 steps. The active player first looks at the tiles in the signpost's path. If at the beginning of a player's turn there are fewer than 2 tiles in the signpost path, a scoring phase is triggered. In a 2-player game, a scoring phase is triggered if there are fewer than 3 tiles. So for instance, if this path looked like this in a 2-player game, a scoring phase would be triggered. We'll go over scoring in detail in a minute. The next step on a player's turn is selecting a meadow tile. When taking this step, a player will choose one of the available meadow tiles in the signpost's path to place on their mountain board. When placing meadow tiles, there are placement rules to consider. Let's look at those now. You can flip and rotate a tile in any way that you wish. You can place tiles adjacent to other tiles, but you don't have to if you don't want to. You can place a tile with its hole covering a burrow, but once again, you don't have to do that. You can't place a tile in a way that would cause it to overlap another tile or hang off the board. And once you place a tile, you can never move it. Burrows are on every player board. These spaces count as covered for scoring and don't need to be covered. However, each burrow that is covered by a hole in a meadow tile is a cleared burrow and is worth 1 point during scoring. It's important to note that players are allowed to cover a burrow completely with a meadow tile. But when they do this, they have to cover another cleared burrow on their board with a marmot token. Any cleared burrows covered by marmots do not score. The next step on a player's turn is checking for rock tile bonuses. If during placement you create what the game calls a group of meadow tile holes that are orthogonally adjacent, you gain a rock tile. You must immediately place this tile on your mountain board. The size of the rock tile depends on the size of the group of adjacent holes. You'll always receive a tile that is one less than the size of the group, unless your group is larger than 5. So for instance, this group is a size 4. So this player would be able to take a size 3 rock tile. It's important to note that there are 2 different sizes of the size 3 rock tile. When a player is choosing, they get to choose whichever one they want. Both snow spaces and cleared burrows will count towards these groups, but if there's a marmot tile on a burrow, it will not count. You will also gain a rock tile if you expand upon a previously created group. So for instance, this tile placement created a group of 6. Once again, the largest rock tile in the game is a size 4, so even with a size 6 group, you would only take this tile. Some meadow tiles, like this one, have 2 holes. If you expand or create more than one group, you can take a rock tile for each group you create. And finally, it's always possible to take a tile that is less than the group you've created, but you can never split a large rock into multiple smaller ones. The final step of a player's turn is to move the signpost to the next space around the hiking map. It's important to note that in a 1 and a 3 player game, the corner spaces count as a path. If on your turn a scoring phase is triggered, a few things will happen. First, the active player will take a picnic tile as compensation for not being able to take a turn. This picnic tile counts as 2 points for scoring. Then each player will count any completed rows on their mountain boards up until they reach the first incomplete row. If you're playing with a horizontal alignment, start counting from left to right. And remember that each burrow counts as covered even if there's not a tile there. So for instance, if this tile weren't here, this burrow would still be considered covered when scoring this row. Each fully covered row counts as 10 points. So for instance, this player has 30 points for their 3 complete rows. Then count each covered space in the first incomplete row. Each of these spaces is worth 1 point. So for instance, this player would have 9 points for this incomplete row. It's important to note that if there's a completed row above your first incomplete row, it does not score. Then each player will gain 1 point for any cleared burrow on their board regardless of where it is. Whoever has the most points is the winner. They take the picnic tile from the active player, or keep it if they are the active player, and turn it to its hiking pin side. In the case of a tie, the player who is furthest counterclockwise from the active player will win. The winner must then cover all cleared burrows with marmot tiles. After each scoring phase, if no one has won the game, the board is refilled. Randomly draw meadow tiles from the box to refill the empty spaces on the hiking map. Then the active player whose turn was interrupted by scoring takes a turn, beginning with selecting a meadow tile. The game will end immediately as soon as a player scores a second hiking pin. Alright everybody, that was our video. Thanks so much for watching. We hope that it was helpful and we hope that it was informative. If you still have any questions about how to play the game, please comment below or email us directly at thedicey@gmail.com. If you want to hear more from the Dicey Review, you can listen to the Dicey Review podcast. It can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, SoundCloud, pretty much any podcast app. You can read our written reviews at thediceyreview.com and make sure to connect with us on social media and at our Board Game Geek Guild. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, we'll see you at the table.